right, we should be live. Jeremy, can you confirm?
Yep.
Wonderful. Well, hello. My name is Robert Baines. I am the President and CEO of the NATO Association of Canada. We're a charitable NGO dedicated to informing Canadians about the value of security and the importance of NATO. This has never been more important than it is this day, this minute. With so many what were previously certainties globally falling apart, NATO and the rules-based international order supporting different entities of multilateralism is perhaps one of the most important things that Canada can be doing right now. After the First and Second World War, Canada and the rest of the West, democracies across the globe, found some very simple truths to build a rules-based order out of. And one of those was the simple idea of NATO itself, how to maintain peace through strength by maintaining a deterrence so that nobody would think of attacking the countries such as Canada and now 32 nations that are members of NATO by the simple idea of an attack upon one is an attack upon all. Nobody would think to attack NATO because of its strength and its dedication to supporting one another. And when it comes to Canada, what is it that we are really preserving? It's our way of life, our values, and our interests. And that is the most important thing for Canadians to understand right now, and that to maintain that kind of strength, the multilateral framework that Canada really reaps so much benefit from, it's all about maintaining our support for NATO, which in this case means spending what we said to our allies that we would spend, which is 2% of our GDP on defense. It's really essential. It looks like we're on the way there, but it's just so important that all Canadians see that our defense is part of our everyday life. Every moment we go out to spend coffee with friends, going out to a movie, going to a concert, all of that has security underwritten within every moment like that. Our health, education, social services, they all understand that there is a golden thread of security underneath those things, an invisible piece of infrastructure undergirding all of that, and all Canadians must understand it. And today we get to discuss a little bit more about our relationships that help to maintain that alliance. NATO, I'm sure you've seen, does require ships, tanks, planes to maintain it, that heavy lifting of kinetic ability to defend ourselves. But really, at its essence, NATO is not about that military hardware. It's about the relationships, the friendships that are at its base. And so I'm so thrilled that we'll be able to talk about one of those relationships in particular today with three of our fabulous moderators, members of our team at the NATO Association that I'm thrilled to work with on a day-to-day basis. But before that, I just wanted to mention that if you're interested in participating in these discussions, making sure that you understand what's going on, why Canada has to be involved globally, please be part of our community online. Do subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't already. Follow us on Facebook, X, LinkedIn, and Instagram, and perhaps become a member of the NATO Association to join some of our exclusive events throughout the year in Toronto, Ottawa, Vancouver, Calgary, Edmonton, and Halifax. Oh, I have to mention Montreal as well. We're really thrilled to have these discussions and that you're a part of them. And for now, I'll hand off the microphone to Narayan, Arjun, and Mary to start a discussion with His Excellency. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Robert, for your kind introduction. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our diplomatic series exploring Canada's relationships with its NATO allies and partners in a changing global security environment. My name is Narayan Srivastav, and I'm a program editor at the NATO Association of Canada.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Arjun Yanglam, and I'm the lead events coordinator at the NATO Association of Canada.
And hello, so my name is Marie Gay, and I was in charge of social media in the NATO Association.
Today, we are honored to be joined by His Excellency Hlynur Guðjónsson, Ambassador of Iceland to Canada. Ambassador, thank you so much for joining today. Before we begin with the Ambassador's opening statements, I would like to briefly go over his biography for our audience. Ambassador Guðjónsson was accredited as Iceland's ambassador to Canada in September 2021. He has 30 years of experience in international trade and investment, public relations, advertising, and politics. He holds degrees in integrating marketing communication as well as history from Emerson College in the United States and the University of Iceland, respectively. Prior to joining the Embassy of Iceland in Ottawa, he served as Consul General and Trade Commissioner at the Consulate of Iceland in New York, where he was responsible for the trade and investment portfolio for the United States and Canada. There, he served concurrently as the General Manager of the Icelandic-American Chamber of Commerce, co-founder and chairman of the Nordic Innovation House, New York, and Nordic City Solutions. He founded and served on the Board of Foreign Trade Commissioners Association in New York, of which he was the chairman from 2006 to 2012. Guðjónsson was appointed to the Export and Marketing Council of Iceland in February 2019 for 4 years. Prior to the Consulate General's office, Ambassador served as brand manager for Icelandic-United States America, a global seafood importer, wholesaler, and manufacturer, where he developed and executed the company's branding initiatives. Ambassador, we now invite you to begin with the opening remarks for today.
Thank you, Narayan, and good to be with you, everyone, today. Good morning and afternoon to some of you. It is a pleasure to be here with you today, discussing a topic that lies at the very heart of Icelandic security and foreign policy, NATO and our collective security. I will start with a short overview of Iceland, culture, economy, and history, and then address Iceland's security and defense and NATO. Iceland is fully within the Arctic tree line, a nation of 390,000 people on a 103,000 square kilometer island in the North Atlantic, about the size of Newfoundland. Strategically placed for various types of logistics and exceptionally well connected by air and sea to North America and Europe. The distance between St. John's in Newfoundland, Labrador and Iceland is only about 2,600 kilometers, just over 3 hours flight, which is nothing in Canadian terms. We are practically neighbors. Only 5-hour flight to Toronto and 7-8 to Vancouver. Iceland ranks #1 in the Global Peace Index 2024 for 16 years running, and is #2 on safety and security according to the Travel and Tourism Competitiveness Report. Iceland is on the top 15 countries in the Global Competitiveness Index in areas such as higher education, infrastructure, and innovation. Iceland is a leader in sustainable energy, and our electricity and space heating use is 100% from renewable energy resources, geothermal and hydro. The Icelandic economy outperformed virtually all peers in 22 and 23, with GDP growth of 9% in 22 and 5% in 23. Economic growth below 1% last year, but growth is expected to pick up again in 25 on the back of declining interest rates, strong growth in emerging export sectors, and solid investment. A medium-term growth level of 2 to 3% as projected would still be favorable in comparison to most of our peers. The main industries in Iceland, tourism, seafood, energy, and technology, stand on firm footing, and close to 2.3 million people visited Iceland in 2024, with an estimated 2.5 million in 2027. Iceland is a country without a military and has emphasized a comprehensive and multilateral approach in security affairs. There are two fundamental pillars of Iceland's security and defense strategy: NATO, which Iceland is a founding member since 1949, and the bilateral defense agreement of 1951 between Iceland and the United States. Iceland has as well entered into cooperation with neighboring states, such as Canada, which entails dialogue on security and defense issues, as well as situational awareness and search and rescue. The Nordics signed in 2009 an MOU on Nordic defense cooperation, NORDEFCO, for further and deeper cooperation in security and defense. In 2016, Alþingi, the Icelandic Parliament, anonymously approved a national security policy for Iceland, covering policies on foreign affairs, defense, and public safety. A part of the policy was the founding of the National Security Council, which monitors the compliance of the policy, which, among other topics, pays specific consideration to, and I quote, Iceland's environmental and security interest in the Arctic, and stresses that Iceland's participation in NATO and its defense agreement with the United States will continue to be a pillar of the country's defense. Nordic cooperation on security and defense will also be developed and strengthened, and the emphasis will be placed on effective cross-border collaboration based on international law and respect for human rights. It will be ensured that Iceland has the defense structure, equipment capacity, and expertise needed to respond to challenges in the area of security, defense, and human security. The government's public defense and civil security policies are part of its national security policy. Emphasis is placed on new global threats brought about by climate change, natural disasters, food safety and security, health safety issues, and epidemics. The national security policy encourages the promotion of increased cybersecurity and stresses that government policy must take into account other global threats such as terrorism, organized crime, and threats to financial and economic security. Canada and Iceland have many things in common, both inside and outside of NATO. Our two countries are bound by geography, by our shared values, and by a long-standing partnership within NATO. Our cooperation is rooted not only in our shared alliance as two Arctic states, but in mutual commitment to peace, stability, and the protection of international norms and values. When we speak of defending the North Atlantic, we are speaking of a region that is vital strategically, economically, and environmentally. For centuries, the North Atlantic has been a bridge between North America and Europe, and for centuries to come, it will continue to serve as an area of great importance, be it in peace or in crisis. And while the past generations have crossed the transatlantic bridge between continents, we can expect the future generations will cross the Arctic as it becomes a pivot for international trade and shipping routes, for example, in terms of logistics, diplomatic communication, and cooperation. So, what is Iceland's role in the Arctic and North Atlantic? We became a founding member of NATO in 1949. I won't tell you that it was without domestic debate, as a country without standing armed forces. But there was a recognition that our security would always be collective in nature. Today, our membership to NATO forms one of the two pillars of our security policy. Iceland contributes to NATO in a number of important ways. During the Cold War, the US base in Keflavik was crucial to North Atlantic security and transatlantic link. When it closed in 2006, Iceland assumed control of the infrastructure, and we decided to maintain it for future allied operations. Today, the Icelandic-Keflavik Air Base continues to support important anti-submarine warfare missions, NATO air policing, and other allied exercises and operations. We operate the Icelandic Air Defense System, which provides the recognized air picture of the North Atlantic, not only to NATO, but also to NORAD through Canada. Across NATO, whether it's in Brussels headquarters or within the military command structure, Iceland provides civilian experts in fields such as cybersecurity, gender expertise, strategic communications, and maritime planning. The challenges we face today, from hybrid threats, cyber attacks, and disinformation, to sabotage of critical undersea infrastructure, require a constant vigilance and strong cooperation. At the same time, the effects of climate change are transforming our region in ways we're only beginning to fully grasp. The melting of the Arctic cap is opening new shipping routes and access to natural resources, along with new challenges. Canada and Iceland have worked side by side in NATO in the regional fora on Arctic security. Both of our nations see the need to deepen cooperation among Arctic nations, both at the operational level and at the policy level. We must ensure that Arctic voices are heard and that the unique Arctic realities and challenges are reflected in NATO policy plans and exercises. Together, we advocate for stability, respect for international law, and the peaceful resolution of disputes. We are also strong proponents of environmental protection and sustainable development. Defending the North Atlantic is an important task that we must approach from a collective point of view. It is about resilience, cooperation, and shared responsibility. It is about small and large nations working together to preserve the values we hold dear. Iceland may be a small country, but we are a committed ally, and we take our role in transatlantic security very seriously. I look forward to the discussion ahead and continued collaboration between Iceland, Canada, and our NATO allies as we navigate the complex challenges of the North Atlantic in the 21st century.
Thank you so much for the warm opening remarks, Ambassador. So as my first question, I'll start off the Q&A session. As a founding NATO member, and as you very clearly mentioned right now in your opening remarks, Iceland plays a unique role within the alliance. Could you share insights on how Iceland contributes to NATO's collective security, particularly in the North Atlantic, and given the evolving security landscape in the region? Do you anticipate any shifts in Iceland's approach to defense and cooperation?
Thank you for the question, Arjun. Iceland's strategic location provides critical support for transatlantic operations, surveillance, and early warning systems. Iceland hosts a nation support at Keflavik Air Base, and it remains vital for anti-submarine warfare, air policing, and NATO situational awareness. But it is clear that we must do more. In light of Russia's war of aggression in Ukraine, increased tensions in the north, and challenges in the transatlantic relationship, Iceland will do its part. We are increasing defense spending, and we are doing more to support allied operations out of Iceland. Our new coalition government has agreed to establish a defense policy for Iceland. This process is currently underway with a parliamentary committee formed to provide political advice to the process. The policy will be based on policies and commitments that Iceland has undertaken and participated in developing, this including within NATO, based on the bilateral defense agreement with the United States and regional defense cooperation.
Okay, so I have a question for you, Ambassador. So as you mentioned, Iceland's security is deeply intertwined with transatlantic stability. And what's really interesting and kind of unique about Iceland is that its greatest asset is not its military strength, but it will be lying in its soft power and economic diplomacy. And given this very unique framework, could you elaborate on how Iceland leverage its innovation ecosystem, Arctic expertise, and global reputation for sustainability to shape NATO's long-term strategic thinking that will go beyond conventional defense?
Thank you, Mary. This is a very relevant question. There's a lot of discussions and dialogues taking place in Iceland on how Iceland can play a larger and more important role in utilizing its innovation system. So just to start with Iceland's startup ecosystem is thriving. It's creative and innovative with a strong focus on sustainability and a great sense of community. I think Iceland has cultivated a dynamic environment for entrepreneurs, particularly in sectors like marine tech, green tech, biotech, fintech, creative industries, and human health and performance solutions. Iceland has various disciplines to offer regarding innovation and expertise that it can offer to the alliance. Today, there are various venues to integrate these strengths into NATO's broader strategic outlook, especially as the alliance addresses climate security risks and certain lack of resources, such as human resources. By contributing its Arctic knowledge and green solutions, Iceland really can help shape long-term resilience strategies that will contribute sustainable solutions to the alliance as nations work toward fulfilling the 7 baseline requirement under Article 3. Here now I will focus in few words on marine tech, green tech, and human health and performance solutions, and how those can relate in some cases to dual use in security and defense and NATO's long-term strategic thinking, beyond conventional defense, for example, in human health and performances. NATO cannot rely solely on the traditional defense industry to develop and mainstream new security and defense technology. There is for sure a need to develop and adopt new technologies at real-world speeds, which is something we hear in the discussion frequently. Iceland can be a part of the solution in this changed landscape and really move at speed. Icelandic companies, for various reasons, size is one, are adaptable and flexible. They can respond to changing demands and rapidly evolving technological landscape, facilitating, supplying, and adopting innovative dual-use technologies that can enhance our collective security and resilience now and in the future. NATO is engaging with startups and small and mid-sized enterprises through entities such as its Defense Innovation Accelerator for the North Atlantic, or DIANA, and the NATO Innovation Fund. A recent dual-use technology in defense and security conference held in Reykjavik in March demonstrated the breadth of expertise and technology in Iceland that could be leveraged to strengthen the defense and security capabilities of NATO member states, and Icelandic industries have an increased interest in the relationship with NATO. Iceland can easily be seen as a center of excellence in marine tech, with decades of successful enterprises with global outreach. Marel and Teledyne Gavia, for example, startups such as Rafnar and Hefring Marine, and companies like Polar Fishing Gear, which produces fishing doors that can be used to facilitate minesweeping. Rafnar addresses few issues that related to human health and performances with its new hull that reduces slamming by over 90%, which reduces, then again, wear and tear on equipment, and more importantly, the crew. And it has unique sea capabilities important to Navy, Coast Guard, and law enforcement. The key here is the human factor for NATO's long-term strategic goals. Close to 100% of Iceland's energy use is renewable, and the green tech sector in Iceland is vibrant, focused on sustainability and efficiency. I will take few examples of those companies. Icewind, for example, has developed a micro-turbine technology for extreme environments like the Arctic. Technology suitable to power remote infrastructure, telecom towers, forward operating bases, and buildings. They have designed for example, a unit that fits on a NATO-sized pallet and can be shipped wherever in the world. They were a part of the first cohort to graduate from NATO's DIANA's Energy Resilience Accelerator program, which they did out of Estonia. Another company that I will mention is Laki Power, an induction power transmission line monitoring technology. You would not necessarily connect that to NATO, but it's also capable of capturing what is going on in surrounding environment in real time. And we'll soon hopefully have a drone charging capability as well. SNERPA Power is the last one I will mention here. Is a technology that allows large energy users to minimize power consumption. Key here is sustainability, adaptability, and better use of resources to fulfill NATO's long-term strategic goals. So just a few companies to mention, but in summary, small innovative states can play an important role in security and defense if its dual-use technology capabilities are utilized. The Icelandic companies, large and small, can help driving innovation, promoting efficiency and resilience. And I believe that Iceland will play a critical role in meeting the defense and security needs of NATO and its member states deep into the future.
Thank you very
Thank you
much.
so much, Ambassador. That is indeed true. I think innovation is really the way forward. And moving on to my next question. In NATO's 2023 Vilnius Summit highlighted the growing importance of Arctic security. And with Finland and Sweden now joining the alliance, NATO's Arctic presence is stronger than ever. Iceland has been a critical voice in the transatlantic security discussion. And given this shifting landscape, what specific role do you see Iceland playing in the NATO's Arctic strategy? How do you ensure that Iceland's security interests are fully represented in an alliance that is dominated by larger military powers?
So first, I will repeat a few of the things that I mentioned earlier, a bit of a background. So Iceland is a country without a military and has emphasized a comprehensive and multilateral approach in security affairs. And as I said, there are two fundamental pillars of Iceland's security and defense strategy, which has secured peace in Iceland for 75 years. One pillar is NATO, which Iceland is a founding member of, as I said, and the bilateral defense agreement between Iceland and the United States. But Iceland has as well entered into cooperation with neighboring states, such as Canada, which entails dialogue on security and defense issues, as well as situational awareness of search and rescue. The Nordics, for example, signed in 2009 an MOU on Nordic defense cooperation, NORDEFCO, for further and deeper cooperation in security and defense. In 2016, Alþingi, the Icelandic Parliament, anonymously approved a national security policy for Iceland, covering policies on foreign affairs, defense, and public safety. A part of the policy was the founding of National Security Council, which monitors the compliance of the policy, which, among other issues, pays specific consideration to, I quote here, Iceland's environmental and security interest in the Arctic, and stresses that Iceland's participation in NATO and its defense agreement with the United States will continue to be a pillar of the country's defense. Nordic cooperation on security and defense will also be developed and strengthened, and emphasis will be placed on effective cross-border collaboration based on international law and respect for human rights. It will be ensured that Iceland has the defense structure, equipment capacity, and expertise needed to respond to challenges in the area of security, defense, and human security. The government's public defense and civil security policies are part of its national security policy. Emphasis is placed on new global threats brought about by climate change, natural disasters, food safety and security, health safety issues, and epidemics. The national security policy encourages the promotion of increased cybersecurity and stresses that the government policy must take into account other global threats such as terrorism, organized crime, and threats to financial and economic security. As mentioned earlier, Iceland has been a valued member of NATO since its foundation in 1949. Iceland contributes to NATO operations with financial contributions, hosting, and civilian personnel. Iceland is an important chain in the link for the alliance to enhance its situational awareness and ability to assess and respond to evolving security environment in the High North through intelligence and shared reporting. In its work within the alliance, Iceland inter alia puts emphasis on NATO's role in disarmament, arms control, and non-proliferation, including nuclear issues. The common values of the alliance, respect for democracy, rule of law, and human rights, collective defense and the importance of solidarity, the transatlantic link, and the indivisibility of security. Iceland also stresses the important role of NATO in implementing Security Council Resolution 1325 on women, peace, and security. The High North and support the notion that the alliance should continue to be open to all European countries that share the values of the alliance as well as it fulfills its conditions for membership. We continue to operate the Iceland Air Defense System, IADS, as a part of NATO's integrated air defense system. Composed of 4 radar sites and centrally controlled air command and control system, it contributes to air and maritime situational awareness in the North Atlantic and the High North. Iceland continues to contribute as a host nation to air surveillance and anti-submarine mission out of Keflavik Air Base, and Iceland is shouldering its responsibility through infrastructure investments and increased host nation support at the base. These missions have increased in scale and magnitude over the past decade. And since 2023, US nuclear-powered submarines, for example, are making service visits in Iceland, which increases the operational time of the submarines in the region. NATO conducts air surveillance missions in Iceland, as decided by the Alliance North Atlantic Council in July of 2007. And missions are carried out by NATO allies at an average of 3 times a year for 2-3 weeks at a time. So we welcome our fellow Nordics, and we are happy that we have finally been united in the alliance and meet at the same table at the North Atlantic Council to discuss and make decisions on our shared security. NATO does indeed encompass small and larger states, but NATO speaks with one voice. All decisions made by the Council are unified. In that regard, Iceland has just as much voice as any other state. We believe the 7 Arctic allies should be the leading voice on the Arctic within NATO, advocating for the integration of Arctic perspectives in the work of the alliance. It is also of great importance that we cooperate with like-minded states such as the UK, Germany, and France, and other stakeholders who share the commitment to international law, peace, and stability overall and in the Arctic. One of the key strengths of NATO is its 360-degree approach. We have a range of challenges across the alliance and must maintain a holistic perspective as well. There are no regional strategies in NATO. There is one treaty, one strategic concept, which applies equally to all NATO territory from the North Pole to the Canary Islands.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Now, as we all very know, that the Arctic is increasingly becoming a space of strategic competition, with NATO obviously strengthening its presence and Russia ramping up military activities, and even China declaring itself a near Arctic state. So given Iceland's unique geographical and diplomatic position, do you believe the region is on the path to militarization? And if you can, how does Iceland balance its security interests without contributing to an arms race in what has traditionally been a zone of peace?
So Russia has made significant investments in the Arctic military infrastructure over the past decades. Some is very understandable. The Northeast Passage is seeing an increased traffic, and Russia must maintain search and rescue capabilities and exercise sovereignty in its territory. However, much of this infrastructure goes far beyond search and rescue and defensive military posture. Russia's exercises and activities in the north have also rightly caused concern, and coupled with its decade-long war against Ukraine that escalated dramatically in 2022, it is clear that Russia is on a dangerous path that could threaten the alliance. NATO has strengthened its defense posture in the north to ensure the safety and security of allied territory in response to Russia's militarization of the Arctic. It would be naive to assume that the Arctic could remain exempt from wider confrontations and challenges with Russia. The era of high north, low tension is unfortunately a thing of the past. What we must ensure now is credible allied deterrence in the north that maintains transparency and avoid misunderstandings with Russia. At the end of the day, it is also in Russia's interest to maintain stability in the Arctic, militarized or not.
Thank you for your answer, Ambassador. I'm going to stay kind of in the same topic, but it's mostly given the recent geopolitical tensions, and I'm looking specifically at like the US expressing interest in acquiring Greenland, and Russia issuing strong warnings against NATO's Arctic ambitions. How does Iceland plan to navigate its role in regional security? And I wanted to focus specifically in terms of whether or not Iceland foresee a need to reassess its defense agreement, such as like the Keflavik air base arrangements in response to like those rising pressures.
So reassess its defense agreements. Maintaining continued strong Iceland-US relations is a priority for the government. And Iceland seeks to further strengthen its already close bilateral defense cooperations. Our challenges and interests are intertwined, for sure. We need to continue to press that America first should not mean America alone. Transatlantic unity has long been a strong asset for both the US and Europe. A stronger Europe will for sure help in this regard. It is obvious, however, that we are entering a new chapter in transatlantic relations. Europe is taking crucial measures to shore up its own investment in security and defense, and Iceland is committed, as stated before, to play its part too, with a new defense policy under development and continued growth in defense-related spending.
Thank you, Ambassador. My next question is about Iceland and Canada, and that is that Iceland and Canada both face the challenge of defending vast maritime zones in increasingly contested waters. In your view, what ideal model of North Atlantic maritime cooperation should look like? One that blends military coordination with scientific collaboration, economic security, and indigenous engagement as well.
So, North Atlantic maritime cooperation should be anchored in the work of the alliance. NATO's standing naval forces play a key role in maintaining a deterrence posture, and the increased connections between naval forces sailing under a national mandate and NATO's Maritime Command in Northwood in the UK is a model we think to build on. But there's there is, of course, a lot of diverse maritime activity out there, friendly and unfriendly, and we have discussed this in some of our past conferences, Canada, Iceland, on maritime security. Iceland is responsible for a large exclusive economic zone and even larger search and rescue area, which stretches our small Coast Guard to its limit. This is the case across the Arctic, where we are content with vast distances, limited infrastructure, and small populations. So increased international cooperation is key here. Our Coast Guard recently participated in the Arctic Coast Guard Forum exercise in Norway, and the Canadian operation Nanook is a great example of international cooperation in this field. Deeply concerning that Russia continues to utilize its shadow fleet to circumvent the sanctions regime. We must remember that the sanctions are in response to Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine, and that's support of the shadow fleet supports Russia's illegal war. Accidents do occur at sea, but the poor seamanship and seaworthiness of the vessels of the Russian shadow fleet has created a unique set of challenges and concerns. We have seen this play out in the Baltic Sea in particular, but it's not exclusive to that region. The Arctic has unique features, which makes the risk of environmental accidents even greater. For example, oil spills, which can be harder to clean in the cold northern waters. We also have, which is something to consider, a much lower population density. And as a result, response capabilities are few and far between. This can be a challenge in early stages of investigations as well as in response. So in the Arctic, infrastructure also generally has less redundancy than in the Baltic and around mainland Europe. And in Iceland, for example, we are highly dependent on our subsea communication cables.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. Moving on, I would say in recent years, NATO has begun changing more directly with emerging technologies, cyber defense, and even climate security risks. Now, given Iceland's digital and environmental leadership, do you believe smaller member states can drive innovation within NATO? Like, let's say, what institutional barriers still prevent such contributions from gaining traction at the strategic level?
Well, this is a good question, Arjun. And this relates to a question earlier on how Iceland can leverage its startup ecosystem as a small nation to meet NATO's needs. And yes, absolutely. Smaller member states like Iceland can drive innovation, and as I mentioned, at the speed of the real world. Our advances in geothermal technology, digital resilience, and green solutions are directly relevant to NATO's future challenges. Greater emphasis on innovation and collaboration across the alliance could increase the alliance's innovation output for sure. Iceland is a part of the Defense Innovation Accelerator for the North Atlantic, DIANA, and the former head of Reykjavik University was elected as a board member on the NATO Innovation Fund, which Iceland was a founding member of. So there is a long list of Icelandic companies engaged in pioneering research and development of technology that is seeing experimentation and use in the security and defense field, such as Teledyne Gavia, Rafnar, Össur, Kerecis, Icewind, Silent Flyer, Defend Iceland, EcoSophy, Turn System, and the list goes on. Iceland has various disciplines to offer regarding innovation and expertise to drive innovation to solve problems and meet future strategic goals. So As I said in the beginning here, Iceland's startup ecosystem is thriving, creative, and innovative, with a very strong focus on sustainability. Iceland has cultivated a dynamic environment for entrepreneurs, particularly in the sectors that I mentioned earlier: marine tech, green tech, biotech, fintech, etc. So yes, we can play a significant role as a small state.
That's really great to know, Ambassador. And thank you so much for your inputs and insights. We'll now open the floor to questions from our live audience. Now, for those watching, please continue sharing your questions in the chat, and we'll address as many possible in the time remaining. Now, we do have a few questions, Ambassador. I'll just, we've selected a few from the chat. So one of them, one of our audience members is asking, given Iceland's leadership in sustainability and environmental stewardship, do you believe NATO should adopt a more explicit climate security mandate?
If NATO should, I didn't get the rest.
Yeah. If NATO should adopt a more explicit climate security mandate.
I mean, NATO. I think NATO has done so. I mean, with the Center of Excellence that is based in Montreal on climate change, and there are various topics there that NATO is looking at with its member states when it comes to climate change. So I do think that NATO has a great recognition of the effect of climate change on our security and defense capabilities.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. The next one would be, what role could Iceland play in integrating environmental foresight into the alliance's risk assessments and operations?
As we discussed earlier, I think that Iceland's stewardship on various aspects of for example, natural resource management in fisheries, for example, in our use of green energy, hydro, geothermal, and increasingly into the future, wind, is something that, and with the technology, the dual use technology that has come out of those industries, we can be again of great assistance to NATO in all those concerns. Yeah, absolutely, and I do think there are solid opportunities in a closer cooperation between Iceland and NATO on those topics.
Thank you,
Ambassador. I'll pass it on to Mary.
Okay, so I wanted to go back on the renewable energy aspect, particularly, and you've mentioned that multiple times, the geothermal power that Iceland actually has, as well as all the sustainable industries like fisheries. Looking from the Canadian perspective, do you see any opportunities for deeper collaboration between Iceland and Canada in areas such as the renewable energy development or sustainable resource management?
Yes, the short answer is yes. There are solid opportunities in closer cooperation between Iceland and Canada, and for example, maybe specifically between Iceland and the Canadian North, and the North in general, Iceland, Greenland, and Canada, for example. There is an increased recognition of the great potential for deeper trade and investment relations, not only between Arctic nations, but as I said, on a north-to-north basis. And I'm going to tell you a little, as a part of this, a little story here. When I was the Consul General and Trade Commissioner in New York, I organized 3 conferences on doing business in the Arctic from 2015 to 2021. And what amazed me every time, I might be a slow learner, I guess, was how difficult it was to find people in the South that had experience or knowledge about doing business in the North, or had an interest in general. So for the 2021 conference, I decided to focus on north-to-north relations with speakers and panelists from Iceland, Greenland, and Canada. And during one of the discussions, one of the panelists realized that he, and I'm going to quote the panelist here, had never thought about trade in any other way than north-south, never north-to-north. And this was someone who was fairly deeply involved in the relationship. So this got me thinking, and I saw an opportunity in this when I moved to Canada. And we set up a set of goals when I arrived here in 21 in bilateral relations and trade between the nations. One of those goals was to build a stronger, more vibrant north-to-north relationship, and to begin with, focus on trade relations. Our belief was that trade relations is a community builder, trade is grassroots, and through trade, we would be able to build stronger bilateral relations between the Canadian North and Iceland, and at the same time, Canada and Iceland. And I will mention that Greenland and Iceland issued a declaration of cooperation between the nations in 2022, in the fall, which could provide a model for further north-to-north cooperation. It sets out a framework for expanding trade, economic, and cultural cooperation, while also delving into specific topics such as fisheries, climate and biodiversity, gender equality, and education. And all this relates to security in the north and in the end to our defense as well. So as I said, I mean, Iceland can play a role here, for example, in sustainable resource management, fishery management, and there are opportunities to collaborate on research to inform potential new fisheries, etc.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. And I'll be asking the next question, which again ties back to Canada and Iceland relations. And I think Iceland and Canada both share deep cultural and historical ties as well, and a strong commitment to multilateralism. And I think when we speak about Arctic cooperation, sustainable development, all of these things, in the recent years, both nations have worked very closely on issues like environmental protection, ocean conservation, and regional security. Looking ahead, do you think there are new emerging areas of collaboration between Iceland and Canada that should be prioritized? For instance, could we see a greater cooperation in renewable energy, scientific research in the Arctic, or joint initiatives in defense and maritime security?
Yes. So maybe before I go into this question, just one point on the prior question. When we're talking about the north and north-to-north relations, to understand that Arctic security, Arctic sovereignty is non-existing without Arctic communities, without strong northern communities. So our communities are central to the idea of Arctic sovereignty because we live on the land, rely on its resources, and serve as human presence that affirms the nation's claim to the territory. In today's world, trade is an essential ingredient in Arctic security and sovereignty, and we will continue working on that assumption and strengthen our north-to-north relations across the board: Iceland, Greenland, Faroe Island, and the Canadian North. But back to your question, given Iceland and Canada's close proximity and shared cultural ties and values, Canada and Iceland can make great partners in advancing sustainable solutions in the Arctic. We hosted the first Canada-Iceland general bilateral dialogue in Iceland in October 22, the second in Ottawa in January 24, and the third bilateral is planned for the fall in Iceland, and the Arctic and North relations is deeply involved in those dialogues. We have discussed a wide variety of topics and issues, from public diplomacy and culture, to economics, to the Arctic, to security and defense and science. In general, more substantial consultation and cooperation bilaterally and multilaterally than we have seen before. Iceland and Canada continue to encourage scientific cooperation in the Arctic and work toward increasing maritime security, including search and rescue. For example, we work closely with Polar Knowledge Canada and the Icelandic Arctic Cooperation Network in Akureyri and Randís in Iceland, and have organized a number of public meetings and seminars on Arctic-related issues to bring what all those partners are doing to the public and make the public a part of the conversation. So this partnership has been a part of our bilateral talks. We have as well had numerous discussions with various universities across Canada on Iceland-Canada partnership, as well as Nordic-Canada cooperation. And we only see opportunities in science and research and development between Iceland and Canada. We would like to see a continued cooperation between our coast guards and law enforcement, for example, through the Arctic Coast Guards Forum that I mentioned earlier, bilateral dialogue and joint exercises in northern waters. And in the future, Iceland could play host to Canada's new fleet of patrol submarines, as it's currently doing with US submarines, and hopefully we will see Canada's new F-35s in Iceland. As I mentioned, Iceland can play a role in decarbonizing Canada's northern communities and Canadian industry. We see opportunities in the use of geothermal, as mentioned, and thermal for space heating. And in that, what we're looking at there is to relieve some of the pressure that is on the energy system and grids in the north, and use where electricity is used for space heating or considered for space heating, use other sources for that, because you can use that 1 megawatt of electricity for economic development, which is huge for a small community. So we can assist with the direct use of geothermal and thermal utilization in those communities for space heating and industrial use for local economic development. But to end with, I would like to mention the increased information sharing and collaboration between academia and the government in Canada and Iceland on security and defense. So since winter 2021, we've organized 4 larger events. One meeting in Iceland on NORAD in winter 21, and 3 conferences in 2023 to 2025 in Iceland and Ottawa on security and defense in the North Atlantic and the Arctic. And this is a large group of stakeholders. The Institute of International Affairs at the University of Iceland, Canada Research Chair in the Study of the North, the Department of Icelandic Studies at the University of Manitoba, Trent University, the Center for Defense and Security Studies at the University of Manitoba, our Ministries for Foreign Affairs, the North American and Arctic Defense and Security Network, mobilizing insights in defense and security minds, etc. So a very large group of stakeholders, which has deepened our understanding of the challenges and the opportunities that we face in security and defense in the North Atlantic and in the Arctic. And this specific dialogue is as I said, crucial for the relationship and a deeper understanding of our security and defense needs now and into the future. And you can find those white papers published on the NATS website if you're interested in seeing what the discussion has been all about.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. Looks like this is all the time we have for. We wanted to collectively express our sincerest gratitude and thanks to you for your responses, for your time, but also for your trust. And I will now give the floor to the CEO and President of the NATO Association of Canada, Robert Baines, for some closing remarks.
Thank you so much, Marie, Arjun, and Narayan. Great job having this discussion with the ambassador. And the ambassador, I loved what you were just mentioning at the end there, the networks that we have. And you just think every NATO country has these bilateral networks, these teams of people all working towards maintaining this peace, prosperity, and security that we have. Whenever people come to me and kind of ask me in despair, how are we going to get out of the multiple challenges we have, the so-called polycrisis, etc., it always comes back to people and those relationships we have. So thanks so much for sharing that with us today. And we're proud of our relationship that we have with you and Iceland. And I can't wait till our next event. And for all of those watching as well, please remember that you're a part of all of this too. Communicating to the rest of Canada is important. It's everyone's job to make sure that our friends, our families, those that we have, our work colleagues, that they are all thinking about this and that they realize that international affairs aren't just something that happens to everyone else. It's very much embedded in what happens to us here in Canada and our daily lives. So Ambassador, thanks so much for giving us your time. Narayan, Arjun, and Marie, thank you for taking us through this conversation. And for those watching, please keep joining us for our conversations in the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Robert, Narayan, Mary, Arjun, for allowing me to be a part of the discussion.
A pleasure. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Ambassador, for joining.
Thank you.
Okay, the live is. Oh, sorry to interrupt. Just wanted to let